If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedmann.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Today, my special guest is a book market researcher. Alex Newton spent more than 20 years in top management consulting for Fortune 500 companies. Currently, he's the founder of Klytics.com, a leading provider of book market research. His genre reports and Amazon category performance database have made the power of big data accessible to individual authors and small publishing houses. Alex's research from analyzing millions of books over the last 5 years has helped thousands of authors to spot opportunities, sell books in attractive market niches, and optimize their book marketing. All the way from Basel, Switzerland. Alex, what an absolute pleasure it is to welcome you to the show. And thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Well, hello, everybody. Hello, Susan, and thanks a lot for having me. It's great to be on the show.
I'm always so excited when I have international guests. We've had somebody from Geneva in the past, and we've done England, Australia, New Zealand, Korea. Switzerland's one of my favorite places, and I know it was my father's. I didn't tell you this earlier, but he climbed the Matterhorn. That's just a little aside.
Well, that is impressive. I haven't come around to do so yet. As we mentioned before, well, I'm German, originally lived in Germany. We just moved here to wonderful Switzerland, but always working in the English-speaking environment. So it's a big hodgepodge. Is that what you say in your language?
That's right. Alex, you're a data and research guy, and possibly, like most of our listeners, I have to admit that I lean more on the side of creativity. Let's kick off first addressing why authors, and me included, as an indie publisher, should be paying attention to market data.
Well, first of all, I'm a creative person too. I play the guitar, so I can relate to the artists in everybody. And I fully agree that before you do anything in the book market, you have to have the craft skills. You have to basically write good books, right? And that is a creative endeavor. So that is very important. However, even if you're just an artist, say, and you don't even care about your market, you at least want to have some applaud. I mean, whatever you write, you don't want to have it vanish in a cupboard, right? The currency may not be money, but the currency may be good reviews or applause for an artist. However, if you're an indie publisher, say if we start with that side of the business, the second you hit that publish button, whichever platform you're using, you're obviously in a business. And any good business person will, at least at times look at data on its own business and ideally also about the market. I always keep telling people, look, Coca-Cola wouldn't launch a new flavor without having it done some solid market research before. And so if you are a writer or a publisher, I always recommend the creative side is utterly, utterly important. But look, there's a market out there, and market can be described in data, supply, demand, prices, trends, all these fancy things.
So that's an excellent point. And as most of our listeners, as you know, are nonfiction authors, but what type of data should the authors be paying attention to?
Well, especially if you are in nonfiction, although this applies equally in these days to many fiction, to all fiction markets for that matter. But one thing to start off with very simply would be the sheer size of the market. Are you writing for a niche market, or is this a big, mass market business and leadership type of book that you find by the gazillions in the airport, right? So there's a market size element. And then to pair it, there's the competitive side of things. And I mean, you obviously coach your people about niche businesses, and that can be measured. So the measure we take for authors and publishers is, for example, the size of categories on Amazon or the number of search results that you get on Amazon or other platforms. You could also look at the number of authors and publishers out there in a certain niche as a measure of competition. And these would be the two most basic values to look at. And then on the next level down, obviously, that is a more static measure. Then you want to know, well, is the market going up, down, sideways? Are the prices interesting to sell the books? Or is it basically an overcrowded mass market where nobody earns any money?
I know that we were talking earlier and you'd mentioned that obviously because of, the crisis situation that we're in now, that's affected sales in different categories. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about what we talked about earlier?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, very interesting, very challenging times for many, if not all of us, humankind. And however, people still read books. And we did see some very interesting shifts. For example, we particularly monitor the Amazon Kindle platform to start with, so ebooks, and Amazon represents some 85% market share in the US. So it's a very good indicator of what's happening out there. And before we had the COVID-19 crisis, whenever you went on Amazon Kindle, you basically had almost like a standard sequence of sales. Number one, the romance genre. Number two, mystery, thriller, suspense. Then usually sci-fi, fantasy. Then the amalgamation of all nonfiction categories and teen, young, adult. That was usually the overall sequence. Now, two things happened very interestingly. The one thing that totally shot up there and which you now discover in the top 100 ranks is children's ebooks. A complete rise of children's ebooks, probably with all the parents now sitting at home, homeschooling and having to spend time with their kids. So what do? They download ebooks to read to their kids. And then within nonfiction, very interesting developments on some categories, where you have certain business books about doing business from home, small business entrepreneurships, suddenly picking up because people are lost their jobs and are forced to make ends meet from home.
That's fascinating. How about categories? I often get asked this question, well, what category should I be in? I know that there are umpteen choices on Amazon. Talk to us about categories. How do we go about finding them? What's the right one? Take it away.
Oh my God, that's we probably could have a 3-hour seminar on this, but and perhaps sometime we will. First of all, there is the categorization system on Amazon that you see on the storefront. And that is the most important one because that is what you see when you browse Amazon and what your clients, your readers potentially see. Now, they will not always browse the categories to find what they're looking for, but search words and categories work together and they have to be in unison. So the category side of things is very important because it's a bit like if you sell noodles at Walmart, but you're not in the aisle where you can find noodles, even if you ask somebody, you basically wouldn't be found. It's very important to put your book into the right categories. First of all, to be found at all. Now, Amazon, as you say, brings you choices. And what is even worse, if you upload your book, if you're one of those who upload Kindle books on Amazon, the back end on Amazon does not match the store front end. So first of all, you cannot find all those nice categories that you see in the storefront in your back end system. And basically, to cut a long story short, after you uploaded your book, you have to contact either Author Central or Kindle Direct Publishing support and tell them exactly the category path where you want your books being listed in. Now, how do you find them and what are the good ones? There used to be until February last year, you could see these whole what's called category paths. And what I mean by category path is something like, okay, let's take a nonfiction example. Nonfiction, arts and photography / graphic design / commercial science illustration. That would be the category. That's how detailed it gets. And especially if you want to be an authority in a certain market, you want to know those exact categories to have a correct categorization for your book also to be found. And these paths, you have to tell Amazon, we provide tools where you can still find them, where you click yourself through bestseller lists. The key part is, start off with a category that matches what your book is. That's the most important thing. Second thing is you can become more tactical because you can have more than 2 categories on Amazon. Many people don't know this because the back end only gives you 2. But if you call them, you can put your book into up to 10 categories. And that's where it becomes interesting because you may have a book in the nonfiction segment that, say, fits the self-help arena, but it's also a business book. So you want to be in 2 different branches. You get the idea. So you can then become more tactical about putting your books into where is it still easy to rank? What is a broad category that gives me broad exposure? These sort of considerations would enter in. But then we're already talking I think, more in-depth seminar about category placement and tactics.
That's a fascinating piece of information to realize that you can do up to 10 categories. But as you say, you have to go and work that out with Amazon because you've got more chance of being a so-called bestseller in one of those smaller categories on the path than you are obviously in the big categories like, I don't know what you said, self-help. If you try and rank number 1 self-help, that's going to be very hard. But self-help in, what did you say, science, photography, graphic design, one aspect of that you could definitely become a bestseller in. What's your thinking there?
Absolutely. The point is, I always say, beware of bestsellers that do not sell. One has to know that Amazon conceived of the bestseller system basically not to, I wouldn't say to defraud their clients into buying bestsellers, but it's basically a marketing gimmick because psychologically, if you see this orange bestseller badge, potential customer is more inclined in a search result to click on a book that has the orange bestseller badge and any bestseller badge for that matter. So Amazon basically said, well, we have like 7,000 plus categories and anybody who is like the number 1 in that very category, simply speaking, can legitimately call himself or herself an Amazon best-selling author. That is great for the authors and it's also great for the potential customers because they think they buy a bestseller. It's labeled that way by the Amazon store. But, and that is the big but, if you are a number 1 bestseller, so for example, there is a category, I think with only 4 books in it, say something like travel, United States /states /Rhode Island. I think there's currently 4 titles or 5 in the category. It is obviously super easy to rank in there. And by the way, the average sales of the number 1 bestseller in that category is only like, 2-3 copies a day, right? If you look at those sales ranks. So it's easy to become a bestseller, but you won't get rich or be able to buy a Ferrari or buy your next house by being a number 1 bestseller, quote unquote bestseller in that category.
I could hug you for that because absolutely. So many authors think, oh, I'm going to become a bestseller. They become a bestseller and they think that's automatically going to equate to becoming rich and famous. And far from it.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
Very much so. And I love the idea of the fact that bestsellers that don't sell. I mean, how many of them are there out there?
By now, Amazon, because the system has been gamed and being abused, they now at least put in, I think, a minimum threshold of, we measured roughly sales rank 50,000 or so from out of 7 million plus books on the Kindle platform. And only then would they put that bestseller badge in there. But even a sales rank 50,000 is not going to make you rich, right? Even if you are there consistently. But that is really what you have to learn. where you earn the money often as a nonfiction author, in my mind, is you use Kindle and the ebook to prove your authority. I mean, it's great if you have that orange badge and you can claim, hey, I'm the number one bestsellers in the category law practice / law office technology, as a completely arbitrary example, where you'd have to sell only like one copy a day to be the number one authority for law office technology. The Kindle books are not going to make you rich, but all the law offices who hire you as the expert to sort out their law office technology, well, that is where you earn your money.
You said earlier, when you and I were talking, the whole idea of currency being authority as opposed to dollars or euros or whatever currency.
Absolutely. Money can be a currency. Obviously, if you are a number one bestseller in the health, fitness, and dieting category, up there in the top 20, you can earn some serious money. No doubt about that. But if you are more a niche type of expert, you just have to be aware that your currency, one, is authority, and that authority then translates into the next currency, which can be whatever. Applause if you're a speaker, or directly money if you sell courses, or if you act as a consultant to somebody. You get the idea. So you have to distinguish in what market am I operating in, what is the respective currency of that market. For many nonfiction authors, the Kindle ebook channel is a marketing channel rather than a direct money generating channel.
I hope listeners are taking note of that, because that is so important. Now, just to sidestep a little bit and talk about the fact that many of our listeners are one-time authors. They've published one book. What is your thinking, or what is the data saying, a standalone book versus, let's say, a series? Is there any data that we should be considering here?
There is, although it's probably a little bit more pertinent to the fiction side of things. What we did, we started measuring, say, the share of series-related titles as opposed to standalone titles across all those bestseller lists, and have done so for the last couple of years. And over time, by and large, we did see a shift towards basically two things. One is another topic, by the way, Kindle Unlimited. So one shift to a bit more to the books that are part of the Amazon subscription. The other being, in many genres, we do see more success of serialized books. In a way, it makes sense because, say, if you put advertising into, the book one of a series, and you have a certain so-called read-through to the later parts in the series, that what I call downstream money contributes to the overall financial success of the project. And since Amazon also put some attention to, especially in the search results, to the recency of the publication, is one of the many factors going into the algorithm, then, if you have like your, say, maritime law, for insurance companies, expert bestseller from 1981 out there as an ebook, it's unlikely that it's going to work very well. So if you have also from an author branding point of view, this is whatever, accounting 101, part 1, beginners, part 2, intermediate, you get the idea. Especially in the fiction realm, we saw in romance, we saw in mystery, thriller, suspense, a huge success of books that form a series, and the series almost forms a brand, or at least either the series is a brand or the author is a brand. That helps a lot the overall marketing on the Amazon platform.
That's so true. And I have a few fiction authors, and they're in the genre like Harry Potter. I don't really know what that genre is, but that genre, and they do trilogies, and those are usually the way they go with those. So I like that. Let's touch on audio, because I know that audiobooks are now rising up there in popularity. Give us some data or information that we should know about audiobooks.
Well, first of all, audiobooks is a field where finally, it's an area where both traditional publishers and, say, the indie publishers and Amazon folks agree. It is a growing segment, right? So even the traditional publishers saw the downloaded audiobook revenue rise by some 33% 2019 versus the year before. And we saw similar positive movements also on the Amazon platform. So the both things that have really been growing on Amazon is the ebook format and the audio format, and print being squeezed in between. Now, for audio, what is interesting there, it is a very interesting channel also for the non-fiction authors, because what we saw there is that particularly in the fields like business and money or self-help, I mean, take yourself as an example. If you drive to work in the morning and you listen potentially to those self-help titles or business titles when you're in the car and drive to work. This year I had a first look at the category sales of the various big categories that you find on Audible books and originals on the Amazon store. Number one, literature and fiction. Well, that's a catch-all category. So far, so good. What's interesting, number two, I found that surprising. People from the genres always tell me it's not a surprise, but sci-fi and fantasy is the number two audio genre. And then already you have a first nonfiction genre, relationships, parenting, and personal development. It's the number three out of some 20 Audible genres that you have. I think 4 is mystery, thriller, suspense, and then already 5, we saw business and careers, then followed by biographies, memoirs, then followed by politics, social sciences, and then some health and wellness. So the typical genres that do so well on the ebook side, take romance, for example, which is clearly the number one ebook category. It's only in the middle of the pack when you go to audio, and vice versa, where some business book categories that do not so well on the ebook format are particularly good in the audio format.
I know that our listeners love to hear about mistakes, Alex. So touch on one or two of the common big mistakes that you see people making in this arena.
Okay. Well, one is almost like my mantra. If you write for at least a little bit of money and authority, don't make the mistake of not looking at market data before you start your project. And there's real life stories, where people say, I keep telling the story. I had an elderly couple who wanted to brush up their pension payments by doing some writing projects, right? And I was like, well, what are you good at? Yeah, we're really good at gardening and horticulture and these sort of things. And I say, well, great, then don't write a Kindle book, because on average, the top 20 are only going to sell a couple of copies a day, and there are more than 20,000 gardening titles out there. Basically, the number one mistake is a complete misconception, overestimation of what the market in a certain format channel is. That would be, for me, the number one mistake. Unless you solely write for therapeutic reasons, then obviously you couldn't care less about a market. Number two mistake for me would be to take that concept too far and only try to write for where the dollars are. I still think you need to choose a field where you have a certain passion for, that is combined with a particular knowledge about the subject and the required craft skill to write in that genre. And I think that applies to both fiction and nonfiction. So passion, knowledge, and craft skill. And then you combine these with the market. Mistake number two for me would be to then only look at the market and forget what you're actually good at and passionate about and knowledgeable about. And then lastly, I think that the third mistake I see is people to underestimate the time and marketing investment it takes over and above the time and creative investment it takes to write and finish the book. As you mentioned earlier, Susan, the Amazon is not going to do the work for you. In fact, you have to pay money on advertising to even vaguely show up on Amazon unless it's a very, very small niche. I think these would be, for me, the top 3 mistakes these days.
Fabulous. I love the idea that passion is so important. I know when authors say to me, oh, well, will you market my book? And I said, I'll never be able to market it with the same passion that you would. I mean, you wrote the book. You're passionate about your subject matter. You're the best person to market your book. Alex, I know that our listeners would love to learn about how they can find out more about you, K-Lytics, your services. Take it away.
Very easy. If you're interested, come visit us at klytics.com. That's k-lytics.com. And there's also a .com/blog. So klytics/blog part. We have lots of free stuff you can check out. There's paid services, memberships, where you can get access to that vast database of category information, including all the performance data. There's ready-made research reports for you about specific genres. I just invite you to have a look. And since, very often the consultation is also a personal matter. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to contact me personally. You can do so via support@klytics.com. That's support@k-lytics.com. And just in the subject line, write to Alex or podcast. It will be channeled to me, and I will strive to give you an answer, whatever the question is.
Fantastic. And yes, listeners, there's a ton of information there. It's gold dust, so go check it out. And as Alex said, if you've got questions, then email him directly. And I'll put all that in the show notes, Alex. As you know, we always end our podcast interview with a golden nugget. So if you were to leave our listeners with one big takeaway from this interview, what would that be?
Well, if you are interested in categories and if you want to upload your book, the one golden nugget would be, don't feel confined by what Amazon, the Kindle Direct Publishing dashboard, provides you with. You can put your book into 10 categories, and there are 2 paths to do so. One is via KDP support, and the other is via Author Central. And you can tell them and have your book much more exposed in more categories than the 2 given by default.
That is a treasure, listeners. So take that wisdom and use it for your book or books. Alex, you've been amazing. I knew you would be. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And thank you all for taking time out of your precious day to listen to this interview. And I sincerely hope that it sparked some ideas you can use to sell more books. Here's wishing you much book marketing success.
The time is now to take action and finally build your book-selling empire. And the great news is that Susan is here to help you. Visit bookmarketingmentors.com and sign up for a free 15-minute book marketing strategy session with Susan. She'll help you discover your first steps to marketing and selling your book. Only those who take action are rewarded, so visit bookmarketingmentors.com, and we'll see you again next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.